I've been noticing a lot here recently and talking just with others, basically myself a lot of times. I answer myself too, it's okay. Is a lot of times when something good happens in our life, it's easy to take the credit for it, right? But if something bad happens, like we're ready to go, right? Like UPS man. Like something, like if something bad happens, like it's hard. We want to be mad at God about it. We want to be angry at God about it. We're in a trial, we're in a circumstance. It's really hard, okay? So how this is going to dive into Advent season for me is how many folks have joy Christmas shopping?
I tell you, if I'm in the mood for it, man, yeah, I have a pretty good time.
Awesome. Once again, I'll have my list for you a little bit later.
I can tell you to get it over with.
Yeah, so it started making me think about that, how that could be a trial. I'm going to end this with a story tonight, and the last question is actually going to be the question we're going to dive into tonight. So you've got your questions here. This last question that we're going to end with is the one I'm going to start with. Do you feel more loved, because this has to do with joy, do you feel more loved by God because he makes much of you, or because he enables you to make much of him? It's a tough question. One more time. Do you feel more loved by God because he makes much of you, or because he enables you to make much of him? Okay? I know this is a crazy question. You're saying, well, it says love, Tyler. That's not what you said. That's next week. Well, joy has to do with that, because I believe to answer that question, we got to get to the bottom of our joy. Where is our joy? Because here's the thing. A lot of times the reason why would I ask that question? Well, the reason I would ask that question is all of us have joy. I just said, hey, how many of us like Christmas shopping? Well, that's great because I can go find the treasures. That's awesome. I love giving gifts. I love doing that. Okay, well, why do you love giving gifts? Well, I love giving gifts because I see happiness on people's faces and I like making people around me happy. Awesome. So why is it that you think you were made to make people happy? Well, that's what God gave his children. He gives his children good things and blah, blah. Right, okay, so why do you believe that's why God gave? So what I'm talking about is, you see how I'm 4 layers deep in this question. What I want to get to is, what is the bottom of your joy? Because there's everything that we're built on is built on foundations. And all the way through, we hear this all the time as Christians. We know this as Christians. Jesus is our foundation. But I'm willing to bet somewhere along the way there's something in our life where our foundation, we may discover even our joy is built on us and what God can do for us, instead of us giving God the glory, which is where his joy comes from. Okay? So that's what I want to talk about tonight. I know that's a deep, deep subject. It's a crazy thing, like, man, we just had tacos, but it is what it is. So tonight I want to talk about joy. So I'm not going to talk too long, like I told you. It's not going to be too crazy. I'm excited about it. I want to share it with you because I've just been pondering this question a lot here recently. So the definition of joy. If you were to Google it, you were to go to Mr. Webster and his wonderful book called The Dictionary, and you look it up, definition of joy is a feeling of great pleasure and happiness. Certain thing to happen. Okay? Let's start with just that one sentence. All right. The Old Testament Hebrew word, there are many Hebrew words. There's like 4. The one we're going to talk about is this sakha. So like you're going to be getting, I just spit all over everybody. You're welcome. So like sakha, right? So like sakha. So if you wanted to know that, that's what it is in the Old Testament, the one we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to define it, and I'm going to tell some stories. So, sakha. All right. And then the New Testament word that we're going to talk about tonight, there are a couple of them, is kara. You could say jara. And that's the Greek word. There are a couple of different Greek words. I think there's like 3 Greek words that are used when they're translating in Hebrew. We're going to talk about those few. These 2 tonight. So I only got 2 words tonight. And a story. So, here we go. Let's start with the Old Testament here. And I put an extra letter in there, so don't you worry about it. That is actually the root word. That actually is one of them too, simcha. But we're going to talk about simcha. We're going to have that typo in there, but it isn't. It actually, if you were to look it up, it is one. And it means exceeding joy. So, exceeding joy. So, joy a lot of times we associate with a feeling, right? Joy we feel is a feeling. And joy and happiness are 2 different things. What's crazy is what we have as Christians is we have joy. Where the rest of the world is connected to their feelings and their circumstantial situation. And tonight, the reason I wanted to talk about really quickly to get to the bottom of our joy is we strip all the feelings away. It's kind of like being in the fire. That's another word in Hebrew in the Old Testament. I can't remember to save my life, but it means fire. But like it's like the dross is coming off of you. That's why that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story is so important, and why we talk about going through the fire. Like when I'm talking about getting to the bottom of your joy, I want to get to what is your joy. Because if I can see that Jesus is your joy, and that's where we're at, and I promise you, it's not a feeling. And I promise you, no matter what season you're in, you're going to have joy. To the Christian, that's it. Because when I look all throughout the Bible, I look all throughout the Old Testament, Israel rejoiced, even in bondage. Even when they were angry at God, even when they didn't understand, even when they worshiped false gods, when they turned back to God, they always rejoiced. That's all they did. So, rejoice. There's joy in it. So, this word means exceeding joy. So, there's just a few different, these two scriptures specifically, we're just going to read the scripture and what it means. And then all of Psalm 126 is what the psalmist means. Rejoice. So, if you got your Bible, I did get the Bible app set up, so we should be good. You can go to the first scripture I'm going to read you, and you can read along with me. It's Psalm 105:43 that talks about this word, joy. He brought out his people with rejoicing. His chosen ones with shouts of joy. That's sakah, right? Sakah. Clear that throat. That's sakah. Like, it's just one of them cool words like that. So, he brought out his people with rejoicing. His chosen one with shouts of sakah. Like, just that crazy thing. So, shouts of joy. Wasn't a feeling, shouts of joy. It was something that was the bedrock of their faith. Like this joy is something that's inside of you. No matter what, it's going. Like it's this thing that pumps you up. Joy, right? Like it's this thing that you have. Right? Advent matters. Number 2, Isaiah 51:11. Isaiah 51:11. Those the Lord rescued will return. They will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. So joy is not a feeling. It's something that faith is built on. Okay? Joy is a response to something else. It's going to make sense here in a minute. I hope it does. If it doesn't, the Holy Spirit will move, so I'm sure it will. I'm going to read you what the psalmist says. Psalm 126 is only 153 verses. It's going to be... So, 6 verses. The psalmist says it this way when it's talking about this joy that we have as Christians. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, which is what we're celebrating in Advent, we were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us. We are filled with joy. Restore our fortunes, Lord, like the streams in the Negev. Those who sow with tears will reap the songs of joy. That's the beauty of the Christian faith, is even though we can cry, we can still have joy, even in the craziest circumstance. Those who go out weeping, carry seed to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them. Okay. Carrying sheaves. We've got one more. I'm going to tell us a story. It's going to make sense. So this time of year, we talk about Advent and joy. So all the way through exceeding joy. The Israelites kept hearing of a Messiah coming. They could have joy in it. We know there were about 400 years between the New Testament and Old Testament. Great message we've heard before about silent nights. Like there was a time frame between that being written. From the psalmist writing this, about 900 years, okay? And from the moment this was written, it's about 900 years before Jesus comes. But Israel continually has joy because something's coming. Like, no matter what, they're reaping in tears, they're sowing in tears, they're going to reap with joy. So, like, they have all these tears. I heard this thing the other day, how God's, and I was sharing this just in my quiet time out. You know how God, and we talked about it on Thursday, how God bottles your tears, like, and you can still have joy. How crazy that is. Like, He loves you so much, He bottles your tears. Like, it blows my mind. You can have joy in that. So Israel's joy is something that's coming. All right? Something that's coming. Something that's coming. So, here we go. Kara, the other word in the New Testament for Greek means source of joy. Now, there's a little something different, right? So the Old Testament is exceeding joy for God's glory. The New Testament now shifts the word for joy to source of joy. So, who is the source of joy? You know the church answer. But let's look here with what it says. Here in Luke 2, verse 10, this is what it is. The source of joy is this. But the angel of the Lord said to him. And so, hang on, before I get to these words, it made me think, as I was getting ready, I wonder how many times they practiced this. Like, I wonder how many times, like when I look throughout the whole Old Testament and I look all throughout the Bible, even as we go into the New Testament, every time an angel appears, we know the answer to this. What happens to the people? They are what? Afraid, right? They're afraid, and they say there's going to be joy. They're afraid. They're afraid. Like, I wonder how many times Jesus is practicing with those angels up there saying, okay, one more time, do not be afraid. Do not fear. And like all the angels are standing there like, not be afraid. Okay, I don't know what's with these crazy humans, but do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid, right? And so Jesus is practicing, and all of a sudden he shows up on the scene because obviously he is the source of our joy. And so verse 10 says this, verse 10 says, but the angel said to them, this is when they're having the shepherds in the field, the angel says to them, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people. All people. New Testament, Israel's restored. Jesus comes, the source of our joy. All people now can have joy because they all have good news. That's why we call the gospel the good news. It is this source of our joy. So when I started this saying I want to get to the bottom of your joy, I want to know what the bottom of your joy is. I want to get to the depth of it, because if I know that you only follow God for what he can do for you, instead of following God for his name to be glorified through you, then I can tell you what your joy looks like. Because if you only pray so that he answers you, nothing wrong with that. I'm not telling you good, bad, or indifferent. I'm telling you you're missing out on a crap ton of joy. And instead of praying so that he answers you, praying that his will be done in your life and that he would be glorified, I promise you the blessing and joy that will overflow in your life throughout the season will be so much greater than you just praying for him to only answer you. For him to be a genie in a bottle. And so I started thinking about this. So I'm going to go back in time for a minute. You can look it up later. I can't remember. I think it was in 2010. There were, and we've had one here recently, so I couldn't remember all the details of this, but I was just going through this in my quiet time the other week. And I was thinking about this story. So hang in here with me. This is where we're going to talk about the bottom of your joy. So in 2010 in Chile, it was one of the first ones we remember in a long time. There were 33 miners stuck in a cave. I'm going to say we all remember that, but I don't know if we do or don't. But I mean, it wasn't that long ago. Now, we just had, not too long ago, I know in an Asian country, I think we just had one, Cambodia or somewhere. I can't remember where we had one. That sounds bad, but I can't remember. But there were the soccer team was stuck. But I couldn't remember all the details of this, but I knew the details of this story, so I wanted to share so you could fact check me. But in 2010, some Chilean miners got stuck, 33 miners, okay? They got stuck. They were stuck for 2 months in a cave. The cave had collapsed, they were stuck for 2 months. And so what ended up happening is over this 2-month period, there were two pipes dug in top of the cave. They vents, basically a vent, they had vented down. And basically what happened is one was for air and one was for food, okay? Now they were able to get some various things in and out of there, but for 2 months these people were stuck. And they lived off some milk, a cup of milk, and tuna fish. That's what they lived off of for 2 months down in this cave, 33 men. And the first thing that they got asked was this: what is a requested item you would have? And one of the first requests they made outside of food, obviously, but they wanted 33 Bibles while they were waiting to be rescued. Guarantee that Bible study was crazy busy all the time. There's probably a few that were over there, but most of them showed up. So they had a Bible study for 2 months inside of that. Now here's what happened, is it wasn't like they were just sitting there waiting for the tunnel to be dug back to them. This communication that would happen is they were working toward meeting their rescuers in the middle. And slowly but surely, 2 months later, one by one, those miners came out. So why in the world am I telling you this story? Well, it started making me think about our joy. Because if I get to the bottom of our joy, we can understand what we're doing, because this earth is literally just a cave. What I loved about those miners is even though they worked toward their rescuer, they knew their rescuer had to come from someone outside of them. They knew that their hope of living, their hope of having life, that they were as good as dead alone inside that cave. But they knew that someone had to come from above to rescue them. And the joy that they had and the work that they had is no matter what, they worked toward that, and they were pretty obedient with what they were told to do. It made me think of us as a Christian. That's literally the life we're supposed to live. Do you think that those miners probably were thinking, I wish I could be somewhere else? I wish I could do something else. But day by day, as they got closer and closer to their rescue, their joy became more and more exceedingly abundant, right? Maybe more than they could ask or imagine. They understood that their help had to come from outside. The source of their joy wasn't in their circumstance, it was in something greater. Us as Christians have that. That's what we share with the world. Now, the reason I ask you that question is, what's the bottom of your joy? Is I wonder how that Bible study went. 33 Bibles they went through. Men by men, there were stories about it. One of the stories, one of the last men that got out, this will give you the chuckle. I know why he was last. They were seeing some people that were greeted by their families, okay? And he was in the 30s. So out of the 33, I think it was either 30, 31, 32, or 33. He was one of the last ones out. And his wife met him, and his mistresses that didn't know about his wife met him outside the cave. So I understand why he was like, no, you go. You keep going. No, you go next. No, I love you. You go next. You go next. He was just hoping they didn't find out. But they found out when I got there, and I'm sure they threw him back in the cave. But it is what it is. Like, I just started thinking about that through this story, and it made me think about the source and hope of our joy is inside this cave that is this world. We know that our rescue comes from above, and in the meantime of us spending eternity with him, we're going to keep taking step by step of obedience to get closer and closer to him. And so my joy isn't in the cave or the things that surround me. My joy isn't in, oh, I only get milk and tuna. I only get to eat milk and tuna. Oh, you know, we could do a lot with this cave. We could add some more lights over here. We could do this. We could do that, right? My joy isn't in that and in a feeling. And in this time of year more than ever, this is when advertising dollars are top notch. Like, this is the time of the year at Christmas where people spend the most. I know we think it's Super Bowl because it's the biggest reach, but believe it or not, that pales in comparison to what's spent at Christmas. This is the year that everyone spends, because we always tell people one more. And it'll make you feel good. And that's the source of your joy. And I thought about those miners. They didn't care if they were hot. They didn't care if they were cold. They just cared and believed that something outside of them had to rescue them. And so the bedrock, the foundation of their joy was in something greater. And so for us, if the bedrock and foundation of our joy isn't Jesus, we're missing out on what he died to give us. Okay? So that question that I ended with, I'm asking you, how do you feel loved by God? I can go layer by layer with anything I ask you about your joy and what brings you happiness, and you can do the same with me, and it will tell you where my joy lies. Because if it ends with me, it's not fully Jesus. And that's the crazy hard part. Because we keep thinking that, yes, we are valued. Yes, Jesus paid a price for us. Yes, Jesus died for us. But more importantly, Jesus cried going to the cross, Father, your will be done, not mine. Then he prayed for us. So we are valued. We are cherished. But if everything we do isn't pointing to him and he isn't the foundation that we're built on, we might as well be in a cave that's collapsing. Because that's all this is. So, when I talk to you about joy, I'm asking you, where's your joy? Because the Israelites knew all about God. They had exceeding joy that he would come through, that he would rescue them. But then all of a sudden, the reason they kept falling off the rails is, that God's going to rescue us. Yeah, we'll go back into that cave again. I guarantee you, if somebody, after I've been in a cave for 2 months, if somebody rescued me, I probably wouldn't even go in there. Even I don't care what the price was. But all of a sudden, the source of joy came in the New Testament, and all peoples were reconciled back. But this time of year, it's hard to live that, isn't it? I know for me it is. So I've been asking myself, where's the source of my joy? Because if I get to the bottom of my joy, am I pointing to myself or am I pointing to Jesus? And so I have learned that if I feel more loved by God by what he can do for me, instead of feeling more loved by God by glorifying his name, all of a sudden see where my joy is, because if it ends with me, it's temporary. If it ends with him, is the one that won't shift. It is the foundation that is strong. And so that's a tough question to ask, and it's a hard question to ask. And so tonight we'll end on it is, what's the bottom of your joy? Because the bottom of your joy will tell you how you feel the most loved by God. Period. And Jesus is the answer. We know he's the answer. But you know this more than anybody else in this room, more than anybody that's watching later when they get this up online sometime in the next year. Wherever that is, for all of eternity, however long it stays up on the server, I'm asking you, what is the bottom of your joy? What's the bottom of your joy? Do you like giving to strangers that are homeless because it makes you feel good, or because it's what God told you to do? Big difference. Both are great. Both are noble. But one points to Jesus and one points to you. What's the bottom of your joy? And so the questions I have for us tonight is, in what ways have you been able to find joy in the trials that you've endured? What caves that have collapsed have you been in that you found joy? Where have you been in that you know that your hope and your rescue was something outside of you? I know we could all probably list a ton of those, but I wonder if we would look back on those and see where the bottom of our joy was. And then the question is, do you feel more loved by God because he makes much of you, or because he enables you to make much of him?